Uh-oh, watch out, boys and girls. You don't want to get a seizure.
Hey there, folks. I'm Quint, and today we're going to be talking about the one, the only, Mega Man 2. Now, aside from the first Mega Man game, the one game that I did play in the series a whole bunch was its direct sequel. A lot of people consider Mega Man 2 to be one of the best games of all time, and just the best Mega Man game in general. So I figured I'd go ahead and see if that was true. So why don't we take a look? Great.
While the sales for the first Mega Man were unimpressive at best, Capcom decided to allow the Mega Man team to create a sequel. According to Keiji Inafune, the game was incredibly stressful to produce. Due to working on other projects, the team had to develop Mega Man 2 during their free time. They worked 20 hours a day sometimes to ensure a game they were passionate about got to see the light of day. In December of 1988, Mega Man 2 was released in Japan and about 6 months later in the US. From the looks of it, the hard work really paid off because not only did Mega Man 2 sell incredibly well, it was met with overwhelmingly positive reception. Mega Man 2 opens up with a cutscene explaining that during the course of a year, Dr. Wily's been creating his own robots to fight Mega Man and help him take over the world. Now, you'd think that Wily would have learned from his first rot with the Blue Bomber that 6 robots wasn't enough to take him down. He obviously needed more than that, especially if he wanted to take over the world. So Dr. Wily creates 8? 8 robots? Really? Come on, Wily, you really think that's going to... Moving on. In order to gain access to Wily's castle, Mega Man has to fight and defeat the 8 robots: Quickman, Flashman, Heatman, Metalman, Bubbleman, Crashman, Airman, and Woodman. Sort of begs the question how no one found Wily if he was living in a gigantic fortress, but alright, whatever. Despite the basic premise, I'm immediately more invested in Mega Man 2 than I was with the original, whereas the title screen in Mega Man 1 was just boring. Mega Man 2 not only has an intro that explains the premise of the game, but also a more visually appealing start screen. Mega Man stares into the night with his helmet off, there's an awesome theme song playing. This is just miles better from a static background and a logo. In fact, I think Mega Man 2 is definitely more visually interesting than the original overall. It shows right when you start your game. The stage select screen has seen a huge makeover compared to the first game, now having mugshots of all the robot masters instead of their actual sprites. The levels are significantly more varied and abstract in their looks, even though I can't tell what half these places are, like Crashman stage. I have no idea what this place is supposed to be. I quite enjoy the more stylized aesthetic the game has. There's something about Mega Man 2's design that makes it seem less cartoony? I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like there was a significant shift in tone between the first game and the second. Whereas I felt the first game was more of a lighthearted adventure, Mega Man 2 feels like the stakes and the danger have significantly increased. Speaking of which, the game also sports 2 difficulties, at least outside of Japan. The Japanese version of Mega Man 2 doesn't have a difficulty selection, the base game is just difficult. This was apparently added in because Japan thought the game would be a little too hard for their Western audience, so to make it slightly easier, they spent the added time putting in a separate difficulty.
But I'm no pansy, alright? I'm Quint. I can do anything. I beat the first Mega Man game, for crying out loud. I'm sure I can beat the second. This game kicked my butt.
Mega Man 2 is hard. Mega Man 2 is very, very hard. As hard as the first game, though? I don't think so. Mega Man 2, while definitely pushing your platforming skills to the test, is significantly more tolerable in difficulty than Mega Man 1. However, that's not necessarily saying much because I still had my fair share of really annoying deaths. Mega Man 2 puts more of a focus on level gimmicks. Each stage throws in something new to try and trip you up. Personally, I like the approach. It helps to further give each stage and its corresponding robot master their own identity. But man, can they throw you some curveballs. I can't tell you how many times I've died in Quickman stage as a kid. You have to be so precise with your movements around these laser beams, and if you mess up once, you'll just be running away in vain. Crashman has a lot of climbing and riding these moving platforms to reach higher areas. Woodman has stuff like fire-breathing puppers and jumping ostriches. Whew! Bubbleman will have you traversing underwater, and take my advice, be careful with how high you jump. Let's not forget the notorious Heatman. Now, I didn't mention this in my Mega Man 1 review, but there are disappearing platforms called Yoku blocks. They appeared in Electman and Iceman stages, and while they were annoying, I didn't think they were worth mentioning. Heatman stage in Mega Man 2, on the other hand, is particularly annoying with these things, especially towards the end of the stage where it has this gigantic platforming puzzle. This is one of the most egregious moments in Mega Man 2 because the Yoku blocks emerge in a really awkward pattern. There are a couple instances of blocks appearing above Mega Man, and if you don't have prior knowledge of the puzzle, you might die quite frequently. And of course, there are some cases where enemies and obstacles are thrown at you in some real awkward places. The enemy placement isn't as bad as the first game, but you can still get thrown off guard by some really annoying baddies. However, while some problems from the first game still persist, like Mega Man's physics, I feel the game is better built around it. On top of that, the game has some items and equipment that makes stages slightly easier to manage. Mega Man 2 introduces E-Tanks. You can carry up to 4, and one will completely refill Mega Man's health to max. It's quite helpful when you're in a bind and you need to refill your health in a pinch, though a downside is that once you game over, you lose them and have to restock. Before I get into the other items, let's get the bosses out of the way. While definitely not as brainless and ludicrous as Mega Man 1's, the boss fights are still a bit sporadic. Nothing reaches Copy Robot or Electman levels of stupid, but some bosses like Woodman or Airman are a bit frustrating because of their projectiles they like to shoot around. For the most part though, the bosses are substantially easier to manage. Heck, a few of them can be taken out with a Mega Buster quite easily if you're quick on your feet. Personally, I prefer to go after Quickman first, because going after Metal Man next will give me access to my two favorite special weapons.
If there's one thing I can say that Mega Man 2 does better than Mega Man 1, aside from almost everything, as I've stated right now, it's the special weapons. Honestly, I feel like Mega Man 2 handles special weapons a lot better than Mega Man 1, and they're more useful to boot.
For one, the game actually makes it known that you got a weapon from a Robot Master. After you defeat one, you are taken to a weapon get screen. It doesn't show you what the weapon does, but hey, it's better than not telling you at all. The weapons are certainly much more useful here than in the first game. While I still don't use some unless it's for bosses, like I'll never use Leaf Shield period because it's so much easier to take Airman out with your Mega Buster, almost every weapon in Mega Man 2 will get some use in some way, shape, or form. Quick Boomerang's great as a rapid-fire weapon, Metal Blade can be shot in 8 directions, Flash Stopper freezes time, and Bubble Head is a good ground killer. On top of that, instead of the Magnet Beam, you are given 3 new abilities known as Items 1 through 3. They create specific platforms such as an elevator or a jet board, and it certainly makes Heatman stage a lot easier to manage, but I prefer to do things the way they were intended.
Alright, after you defeat the 8 Robot Masters, it's time to yet again go and abuse the elderly. Like a good sport.
Like the first game, if you made it this far, you shouldn't expect too much of a challenge here. You will have to use items 1 through 3 to get past certain points of the stages, and it can be a bit of an issue later if you haven't been using your special weapons sparingly. Your biggest challenges are the levels themselves, as the bosses can be easily dispatched with Quick Boomerang and Metal Blade. These guys are definitely no Yellow Devils. It's still a shame that we couldn't get some fun bosses, everything here just goes down really quickly. Except for the turrets in the 4th Wily stage. You see, at the end of Wily Stage 4, you fight these turrets mounted on walls that cannot be killed with any weapon except for Crash Bomber. You are given 8 Crash Bombers. There are 8 turrets. Keep in mind there are also walls that can be destroyed with the Crash Bombers. Do not attempt to blow these up. The boss room tricks you into potentially wasting a bomb on the wall. That's not fair. Why couldn't there be 6 turrets instead of 8? Or better yet, why have a boss that can only be killed with a special weapon? That's ridiculous!
And that's alright though, aside from the final boss, this is really the only time that the game does something like this. In fact, for the most part, I feel like Mega Man 2 handles using special weapons outside of levels pretty well.
As I said before, you do have to use items 1 through 3 to get past certain points of Wily's castle. Another great use of special weapons is actually in the 4th stage, where the game encourages you to use Bubble Lead to scout for fake floors. I think that's genius. Again, just be mindful of how much you use your weapons because you are going to need them for this game's boss rush. Yep, returning from the first game is the rematches with the Robot Masters. However, whereas you had to fight them all one after another in the first game, Mega Man 2 instead spaces them out through teleporters. You don't have to go through an entire stage to get here. If you come with E-Tanks, you can use those, and after defeating a Robot Master, they give you a health drop, giving you a better chance of success in the next fight. This is infinitely better than how the first game handled this. Same as before, after defeating the Robot Masters again, you fight Wily. Take my advice, Mega Buster, then Quick Boomerang, bam, he's done.
It's not over yet though, because after Mega Man falls down into the catacombs, we get one final stage. You know, I just realized something. In Japan, the game's actually called Rock Band 2, The Mystery of Dr. Wily, which is pretty strange to me. I mean, like, what mystery is there?
So after finding out the mystery of Dr. Wily, we use Bubble Lead, which is the only thing that hurts him, and oh, thank God, it was just a hologram. After that, we get a really cool credit sequence of Mega Man walking, reflecting on his journey, and the game ends.
You know, while it's not my favorite in the series, after revisiting Mega Man 2, I absolutely adore this game.
Mega Man 2 improves on every single aspect of the first game. It's not perfect, as there are some moments where the game can be a bit cheap, but for every single thing that Mega Man 2 does wrong, there are 2 more things I find that it does right.
It's even more impressive that this game was made possible by a team that truly cared about their work. Again, this game was made on free time, on top of working on other games in conjunction. The fact that they were able to make a game that not only improved the Mega Man formula, but would also set a standard for the games that would come after it, is quite an achievement. I will say that some of the later games do become a bit more polished and easygoing, and would probably be better starting points, but I think the game for the most part offers just the right amount of challenge. On the original NES version and the recent Legacy Collection, which is what I played on, Mega Man 2's English version does have a normal mode. While it doesn't do much to change up the level design or enemy placement, it does make enemies and bosses take double damage. So if you're looking to try out Mega Man for the first time, I'd say skip the first, play the second.
I love this game. A lot of people love this game. And while it may not be my favorite Mega Man game in the series, it truly is one of the best games of all time.